The Jared Dillian Show.
I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show. Please call at 877-711-5211. We can talk about debt, and you can also find me on the web at jareddillianmoney.com, or you can call at 877-711-5211. And, debt will blow up the world. The funny thing is, I actually made up a quote one time. I'm actually, not many people get to make up quotes, and I don't know if this is going to mean anything to you, but the quote that I made up was, to err is equities, which means stocks. To really screw things up takes fixed income. And if you think about what happened in the dot-com bubble of 99 and 2000, I mean, that was the biggest stock market bubble that the United States had since 1929. And a lot of people said, myself included, that when that stock market bubble popped, that we were going to go into a depression, which seemed reasonable at the time, especially when you consider our experience in 1929 in the Great Depression. I thought we would go into a depression. And as it turns out, we did get a recession, but it was a very incredibly shallow recession. GDP was barely below 0%. It was barely a recession. Now, a lot of people lost a lot of money in the stock market, but from an economic standpoint, it wasn't that bad. Now, contrast that with what happened in 2008 when debt was involved. See, in a dot-com bubble, there was no debt. You know, maybe people had Reg T margin on their stocks, but that was basically it. In 2008, it was debt on top of debt on top of debt. If you saw the movie The Big Short, you probably got to learn about CDOs with what's-her-name in a bathtub, Margot Robbie, I guess. And that's probably why everybody knows about CDOs now, and subprime mortgages and subprime mortgage indices and all kinds of stuff. It was all debt, lots and lots and lots of debt. And that is what almost destroyed the world. And I think a lot of people, people remember the Great Recession. They remember unemployment got to 10%, and they remember how awful it was economically and how long it took to recover. But I think unless you're a capital markets person, you don't really have an appreciation for how close we came literally to the financial world coming to an end. Within hours, we came that close. And it was because of debt. So debt is very dangerous, and the goal is to be debt-free to the extent possible. And some people like to say, well, debt is leverage. That's the word the investment bankers like to use. It's leverage. It's almost like a seesaw. You can lift something up with it. You can use leverage. And debt does give you leverage. But that leverage works both ways. It can work in your favor. It can work against you. So there are a couple situations that we mentioned that you can start saving for retirement before you pay off your mortgage. You can save for your kids' college tuition. You can build an emergency fund. Those, I would say, are the exceptions to the rule. But in all other circumstances, you're going to want to pay down debt as aggressively as you can. And by the way, we talked about car loans a little bit. Car loans have gotten very aggressive in the last few years. And part of the automobile industry is suffering. They're not selling as many cars, so they're working really hard to give people as much credit as possible to buy as many cars as they can. And they're doing some things that you shouldn't really do. For example, never, ever, ever take out a car loan with more than a 5-year maturity. Never get a 6-year loan or a 7-year loan. There's actually 8-year loans floating around. Never get anything longer than 5 years. And the reason is that a lot of people don't own a car for 6 or 7 or 8 years. It breaks down, you crash it, you trade it in, whatever. And then what happens is you're paying off a loan on a car that you don't own. You're just paying a loan for no reason. And then you're in another car and you have another car loan. So the debt it turns into an avalanche. So 5 years is the only length of car loan that you should get. The other thing you should realize is, and by the way, this is big around Myrtle Beach. This is huge where I live. you have you have the legit auto dealers, like the Toyota dealerships and BMW and Mercedes Benz and Dodge and stuff like that. But then you have these sketchy little auto dealers like on the side of the road. They have like 30 or 40 cars. There's like a hand painted sign out front. They say everybody qualify. I don't know the exact phrase, but they say everybody qualifies or no money down or whatever. And these are what you would call subprime auto dealers. And they, for lack of a better word, they sell cars to people who can't afford them. They sell them to poor people, and they take advantage of them with very predatory loans. And, the type of loan, somebody might buy a $2,000 car with a 7-year loan with a very high rate of interest, and they might buy a $2,000 car and pay $6,000 in interest over the life of the loan. What happens is that people walk into these situations, they walk into these, car dealerships, and all they care about, and this is how people get screwed. This is 100% how people get screwed. All they care about is they walk into one of these auto dealers and they say, "What's the monthly?" That's all they care about. What's the monthly? $400 a month? Fine. I can do that. And they don't care about the math. They don't care what the interest rate is. They don't care how much interest they're going to pay. All they care about is that they can they can make the monthly payment. And the car salesman, if he can make the monthly payment work, then that's great. Then he just sold a car. So like I said, you get these situations where people are in cars that they can't afford, and they pay huge amount of interest relative to the car they're in. And by the way, these subprime auto dealers, even though they look kind of sketchy and run down, they have very sophisticated systems to repo the car if you don't pay the loan. Some of them actually, I think they have like they almost have like a lockdown feature. So if you don't pay the loan at the end of the month, like you can't get in the car, they will come tow it out of your driveway while you're eating dinner. Like that is how aggressive they are. We're going to go to a caller. Sarah from Vermont, you're on the air.
Hey, Jared. So it's kind of a convoluted question, but I'm watching a show called Years and Years. It's on HBO. It's really good.
What's it called?
Sort of gently in the future. Sorry?
Well, what's the name of the show?
Years and Years.
Okay.
Years and Years. Yeah. And it's about 5 or 6 years in the future. And it basically, there's one scene where a family sells their house and has, they're in England, so kind of 1.5 million pounds put in their bank account. Overnight, the bank fails, and there's essentially a run on the bank. It's a literal run on the bank. There are people running down the streets of London trying to go from branch to branch, try to get cash if they possibly can. It talks about how they're eventually kind of insured for £85,000, and I know that in the U.S. that we have FDIC insurance, but what do we do as investors and people who might be lucky enough to have kind of over that $250,000 limit? How do we protect ourselves, and what do we do with money so that we're not at risk if there's a bank failure? I know that we're kind of far away from the 2008 situation, but it's something that I've always been thinking about.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. Thank you. This is the type of thing that you don't have to worry about 99.99999% of the time. And we actually had to worry about it for a couple hours in 2008. So all bank deposits in the United States are insured to $250,000. So you can put $250,000 in the bank. If the bank fails, you will get a check from the FDIC fully reimbursing you for that amount. Some people, nice problem to have, they have more than $250,000. And then they're kind of stuck because, for example, let's say they put $500,000 in a bank. Pardon me?
Oh, sorry. I called back in. I got disconnected. I'm back.
Okay. If they put $500,000 in the bank, then they would get reimbursed for $250,000, but then they would have to lose the other $250,000. So what some people literally do is they spread out $250,000 in several banks. 4 banks, 6 banks, 8 banks. For a while, I don't think this exists anymore. I think the regulators shut it down. But back about 7, 8, 9 years ago, very wealthy people who were high net worth investors at the large brokerage firms, they actually had a service where they would deposit money in an account, and on the back end, the broker would spread out the money into different banks, making it all FDIC insured, which is kind of cheating. So I think the regulators shut it down. So in the example that you talked about in the show, that's just bad luck. If you sell a house and the money goes in the bank and the next day it fails, there's really nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. Now, there are some other alternatives. Money market mutual funds are not insured, and they had some turbulence during the financial crisis when the reserve primary fund failed. But once again, 99.999% of the time, the money market system in the U.S. is pretty reliable. So I would say that's probably your second choice for where to put money.
And is an investment account, if I have a broker or somebody who manages my money for me, maybe it's in mutual funds, maybe it's in, whatever, is that protected, or is there a limit on those kinds of accounts as well?
That's protected by it's not protected by FDIC. It's protected by something called SIPC, which is it's Securities Industry Protection Corporation. It's a little bit different and the limits are different. But you do have some protection in a brokerage account. We got to go. We'll talk about this when we get back. I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show.
The Jared Dillian Show.
Hi, this is Jared Dillian. Catch the Jared Dillian Show from 6 to 8 Eastern only on the Smart Talk Radio Network.